мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
We are under attack. It is an attack against Western democracies and on the institutions that bind them.
What Russia's much more interested in doing is depicting the West as a failure.
The regime and President Yanukovych, they were trying to protect their enormous wealth.
This is Kremlin File.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Kremlin File. This week, Olga and I are here to welcome Nicki Kenyon. Irene, hello.
Hi. It's so great to see you guys.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Likewise,
absolutely
I know.
wonderful. Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yes, definitely.
Tis true. Irene, we got a lot to get through. Okay, so we're just going to jump right in.
Let's do it.
Yep, let's do it. So let's get into sanctions. Okay, first of all, and as a strategy, as
Just
a strategy
a little.
for international, just a little bit. It should be up your alley. Okay, Irene.
A little bit.
So just a little bit. So we know that, right? The sanctions are an international strategy. Okay, as a response. And what we wanted to talk about was their significance, a little bit on their effectiveness as a response to Russia's illegal, genocidal, war against Ukraine. So let's get to the first area that we wanted to cover, which is Russia's shadow fleet, right? That everybody is talking about. Recently, a shadow fleet oil tanker carrying sanctioned Russian crude oil was involved in a collision, at sea. Near Denmark. There are other ships that have also been sighted off the coast of Denmark. Okay, that's come out this week. And also the United States has taken recent steps against Russia's shadow fleets. Will the recent sanctions that have been imposed by the United States on Sovcomflot, Russia's leading oil tanker group, will they impact Russia's ability to generate revenue from oil sales? And what can we do about this, Irene?
So, we've seen actions taken against the shadow fleet. We've seen the shadow fleet being used to evade the oil price cap. We've seen common evasion techniques like AIS manipulation and ship-to-ship transfers used to ship Russian oil above the price cap. I would submit each time we find a new methodology and we take action against it, either through prosecution, through additional sanctions, and through trade restrictions, they adjust. When I worked at Treasury, we used to call it playing whack-a-mole, that little game where the little animal pops up through holes and you have to, smack it around. But here's the thing, all right? The price cap actually is working. Russia's oil revenues are down, which was exactly the goal we had hoped to achieve. It wasn't to stop the flow of Russian oil, but to limit the profits. And that's exactly what we're doing. Energy market participants, analysts, even Putin's oil czar have all linked the rising discount of Russian oil to the price cap and to the coalition's increased enforcement activities. Treasury did an entire article about it last month, right? It flagged that the Kremlin's oil tax revenue was more than 40% lower in the first 9 months of 2023 compared with a year earlier. Frankly, if the oil cap wasn't working, I would say Russia wouldn't be working so desperately to evade it. And the thing is, the riskier the evasion, the more it's going to cost for Russia. And considering the increased enforcement efforts, I'd say the risk is definitely increasing. I mean, look at India. Its refiners are refusing to take Russian crude from Sovcomflot tankers because they're afraid of sanctions. I'm sure we'll see other entities backing away from Russia as well. And there have been, several suggestions, we talked about what can we do about this, right? There have been several suggestions about how to limit the proceeds from energy sales, even more than what we're limiting now. One is to lower the price cap even more to like $45 per barrel or even $30 per barrel. I think that's probably being examined as the next step. The Yermak McFall group, last month they issued a working group paper on constraining Russia by using additional energy restrictions. So I'm sure that's being looked at. Obviously, curtailing Russia's shadow fleet is a priority. Further lowering the price cap, targeting other energy like LNG, liquefied natural gas, working with the EU to continue reducing their dependence on Russia's hydrocarbons. There's still a lot we can do, and it's a matter of gradually ratcheting up pressure.
Okay.
And I think that's what global powers really are trying to do.
Yeah. Well, it's also, it was also in the EU this week. The past 2 days, there's been the EU Commission summit that's going on. So they're looking at other areas where they can hit and hit hard. Yep.
But it's, if you throw everything at Russia all at the same time, we've got nothing else, right? We've got nothing else to throw at them. And we had this discussion at work at the Institute for Financial Integrity, where people were like, well, why don't we just comprehensively sanction them? Why aren't we just embargoing? Why aren't we embargoing them? And I said, look, it's a little different than embargoing Iran or embargoing Cuba, right? Those are smaller countries. They're not as integrated into the world economy. Russia is the 11th largest economy in the world. It's a little different trying to comprehensively sanction them, which is why, we're trying to balance the impact on ourselves, on our partners, and at the same time, still pressure Russia.
Okay.
All right. Irene, in February, the United States implemented new trade restrictions on 93 entities from several countries, which included China, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, India, and surprisingly, South Korea, citing their support for Russia's genocidal war in Ukraine, because, as we know, Russia has been able to, manufacture and increase their military production, weapons production. I mean, like fivefold. Among these entities listed, some were included for diverting controlled microelectronics, microchips to Russia's military and intelligence agencies, while others were targeted for acquiring American equipment to aid in Russia's replenishment of munitions and other military supplies. How effective do you think these trade restrictions that Biden imposed are? And do you see secondary sanctions as being like another tactic and deference, having a deference effect on countries that continue to help Russia?
Yeah, so I think that it's been quite effective because, again, Russia wouldn't be working so hard to circumvent these restrictions if it wasn't effective, right? And just, I think it was this week, BIS, the Bureau of Industry and Security, basically put out a final ruling saying, look, if an entity is on the SDN list, then it's automatically subject to the EAR, right? That makes sense. And, we've seen these increased efforts to evade trade restrictions before. We've seen shell companies in neighboring countries used to transship restricted goods and technologies to Russia. We've seen reports of Russian efforts to establish shell and front companies in neighboring countries like Uzbekistan. And again, the more evasion efforts we see, the more it's going to cost for Russia to gain access to these goods and technologies that they need, right? So the more difficult we make it, there's at some point going to be a cost-benefit analysis, right? Because it's going to be more expensive and more difficult for Russia to actually, employ these techniques. And at some point, they're going to say, well, we're not getting the profit that we need, but we're spending tons and tons and tons of money trying to evade these restrictions. So secondary sanctions are, a separate issue, right? I have a coworker who hates that term. He's like, well, they're just regular sanctions. I'm like, okay, let's put that aside. The mere threat of them is working like a dream. So once EO 14114 was signed in December, authorizing sanctions against foreign financial institutions that support Russia's war machine, we started seeing reports that banks in China, in Turkey, in the UAE are slowly backing away from business with Russia. I did an article on my Substack recently that had a poll asking which bank would be sanctioned first under 14114. I think Raiffeisen is definitely on that list. And its Russia business is being closely scrutinized by regulators because honestly, that's about the last thing anyone wants. Regulators knocking on their door, right? So, I kind of expected OFAC on the anniversary of Russia's attack to at least designate a couple of financial institutions under 14114, but that hasn't happened. And I think the reason is because everybody's kind of stepping back, slowly stepping back, like, no, we don't want this. Because the last thing a financial institution needs is to be cut off from the US dollar.
In fact, Irene, I wanted to actually ask you about, the Raiffeisbank. That was the next topic that we wanted to get to. You've mentioned it already now. Okay. So keep your lederhosen on. Okay, and let's stay in Austria.
You don't even know if I'm wearing pants.
The United States is pressing, Austria's Raiffeisbank International, which is the largest Western bank in Russia, to drop plans to buy a 1.5 billion euro industrial stake of a Russian tycoon, Oleg Deripaska. So, I mean, you're saying now that they're starting to go back a little bit, that there's some movement, but what's going on with this situation? And, can the United States put that pressure on the bank itself? What's your take on this one?
Well, apparently we can, and we are. Treasury is certainly working hard to pressure Raiffeisen or RBI. It's a major bank, and losing its correspondent accounts and access to the US dollar would impact it super hard. So is the deal legal? I would think so. And as long as there's no US nexus, which means, no US persons, no US entities, no US dollar involved, no like US linked jurisdiction involved, I'm not sure anything that could be done. But that said, I read a report just today says US pressure could very well derail this deal. So it may be a moot point to begin with, right? Austria is not keen on having its biggest bank lose access to the US dollar. And there are rumors that RBI itself is slowly backing out of that deal, despite, like, they actually said, they claimed that they carefully vetted all the compliance issues, everything. And that may very well be true. But with their Russia business being examined very, very carefully, reports are that they are moving away from that deal because Deripaska is so slimy that doing business with him, even if you are not subject to US law and US sanctions, it's bad for your reputation. Really bad.
Like, why would you even want to go to dinner with the guy? You know what I mean?
He's creepy, he's slimy, he does everything possible to try and gain access to things that he has no access to. So, yeah.
That's why I laughed. They vetted it very, very hard.
Really?
They just happened to miss Oleg Deripaska, who
well, there's a difference between legally allowed and should can I do it and should I do it are two different things.
Yeah, not ethically.
Sure. Just before we go on to the next one, Irene, this is something that, just came to mind, but with OTP, is it the same or not? The OTP bank, because they've been trying, Europe has been trying hard to hit that. And we know in Hungary. What's, can you just
the fact of the matter is, fact of the matter is OTP, like Hungary can slam on brakes and really put a kibosh on, additional sanctions packages and this, that, and the other. So it's very hard for the EU to do anything about OTP. Now, we did sanction that other bank, that spy bank or whatever they called it, a while back, sometime last year, because it really was like a bad Russia-linked bank. OTP, unless there's something really, really bad, and unless they are absolutely in violation, I don't see how the EU can do it, because you're going to have Orban, claiming that he's going to derail any kind of additional designations, and that's the last thing that EU needs, because what they want is this united front against Russia.
Yeah, so that's his leverage right there. Got it. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, and the bank, the spy bank is there are two of them, VTB and VEB, both connected.
Oh no, there's a Hungarian bank too.
Oh, a Hungarian. Oh,
yeah.
Oh boy. They also have a spy bank.
How surprising,
right?
How surprising.
The FSB set that one up too.
I know, shocking. It's what is it called? IIB, International Investment Bank. It's from
okay.
Got one of those kind of designations. Got it. All right.
Now on to crazy news. Washington Post recently published a report that Western firms bought hundreds of millions of dollars of titanium metal from a Russian company with deep ties to Russia's defense industry. And this amount is post Russia's full-scale invasion. According to a review of Russia's export data. Why hasn't VSMPO Avisma, the titanium supplier partly owned by Rostec, which is sanctioned, faced sanctions from either the United States or EU, despite the security risks?
So first of all, unless it's 50% or more owned by Rostec, it's not automatically blocked by force of law. But my educated guess is that, much like, remember Rusal in 2018, people are hesitant to disrupt the titanium supply. This is a metal that's used in heavy tech, it's used in aerospace, and Russia has 13% of the world market share of basic titanium. So VSMPO Avisma is the world's largest titanium producer. And the question is, okay, how do you replace it? See, I don't think it's going to be that hard, but that's just me. Osaka Titanium in Japan produces almost as much as the Russian firm. And there are a couple of other Japanese firms that also produce titanium. So, and then there's the United States. Like, we have a titanium industry too. So I think those supply chains would shift if Avisma is sanctioned. Personally, if I had the money, I'd be investing in Japanese titanium producers right now.
Hold on, let me make that call right now.
Right? Like, let me take my millions and invest them there.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the fear is the disruption of the titanium, which is really, really important for, especially the aerospace industry. That's super important. So I think that's where the fear is, but I think that fear is pretty much misplaced.
Can I actually go back onto a point you made? Because I work a lot, forever in Russian registries. And I've seen, it's happened so many times where US sanctions a company. And then that company opens up a front company and they own 48% of that front company. And then you have, a few other companies that own the balance. And now you still have the same sanctioned company operating as a front, or using a front company. It's still them, but because they hit under the 50% threshold, we don't do anything. How does that even make sense? And can something be done? Because I've seen it. This is going way past, the Russia's full-scale invasion. I've seen this in so many cases, and I'm like, but they even name it to mock us. They'll even name the company very similar to the sanction company and just keep it right under the 50% threshold.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a concept of control, and some executive orders in the United States have it, some don't. But in the EU and the UK, it's more than 50% owned or controlled. So if control can be proven, then it's still designated, and it doesn't matter if it's a front company and whatever. In the United States, it's a little bit different, but like the EU, there was a court case just recently where they removed Nikita Mazepin off of the EU sanctions list because the EU said, hey, just because he's related to his dad doesn't mean that he should be sanctioned. So there's a question there of, okay, is he benefiting from his father's links to the Kremlin? The UK recently put out guidance that said, look, just because a company is located in Russia doesn't mean it's controlled by Putin. Now, we know better, right? But it's a direct control issue. I would say, like, if you had some kind of intelligence that says, oh, hey, a Russian oligarch has control or can name, the majority of a company's board members, that's control. There's a few different things that can help determine control. So, that's still an issue, and they can still be designated under that prong. But yeah, I mean, 50%, more than 50% and control in the EU and the UK, 50% or more in the aggregate in the United States, that's the law, unless there's specific, unless the law is written in a specific way or an executive order is written in a specific way that says, if this entity is owned or controlled by a specific individual.
Hi, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to help us out with our independent work, please subscribe to Kremlin File on Substack and on our YouTube channel. Kremlin File is hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camarra. Our production team is headed by Maddie Kaparov, and the theme music by Oreste Camarra. So please don't forget to visit our Kremlin File Substack for links to our socials and to wherever you'd like to listen to podcasts.